Hi, good morning everyone, and welcome to this Q Associates live event. My name is Jerry Allen, and I'm the head of the Modern Workspace practice here at Q Associates. Over the next few weeks, Q Associates are running a series of live events with a specific focus on technologies and products that are going to help us during this time of lockdown and remote working. And the first of these live events today is around Microsoft Teams. Now, the format of the event is that it's going to be a fairly high-level introduction. Obviously, we can follow this up with individual sessions to look in at more detailed or complex questions, but today's event is fairly high-level. I have opened up the Q&A as well, so please do post questions throughout the event, and I'll address those as we go along or at the end of the event today. So, what is Microsoft Teams? It's the flagship collaboration product for Microsoft. Microsoft see this very much as a complete replacement for Skype for Business, or what was previously known as Lync or Lync Server. It's got the chat, voice and video calling that was contained within Skype for Business, but it's also gone on and includes a lot of other functionality like document collaboration, live events, which is what we're doing this morning, screen sharing, etc. And although it's a Microsoft product, what you can see over on the right hand side here is it runs on all platforms, both on smartphone and desktops and tablets, etc. And what we're hearing from within Microsoft is that this is the product that's receiving the most R&D spend across the whole Microsoft product suite. So it's a key focus area for Microsoft and a major investment for them. So when you first log into Microsoft Teams, this is the sort of interface that you're presented with. This is the view of the desktop client. So some of the key concepts here. First of all, the Teams list, which is down the left-hand side of the screen here. The team is the kind of the high-level security container within Microsoft Teams. So there's only really two security levels within the team. There's the owner and the member, and it's the owners that manage the membership of the team. And then within the team, we have the concept of channels, which is really about a subtopic or a sub-project within the overall project. So a way of focusing the conversation down into a specific topic. And again, as of late last year, you can now secure the channel to a specific group of people rather than allowing it to be accessed by the overall team. So a good example of that, for example, is that you could create an HR team where you've got the membership of the whole HR department, and then you could have a private channel within that team for payroll, and you'd only give access to the payroll channel for those people that are authorized to see the payroll data. You can drag and drop the teams and channels here in this list to order them as you see fit. You can hide teams or you can hide channels within Teams just to tidy up the list of what you can see here. And you can also hide them completely. And they'll drop out of this focus list and drop down to the bottom of the screen under Hidden Teams. There's also now the concept of organizational wide teams. So if you create an organizational wide team, you don't have to worry about new starters and leavers. The membership of the team will be managed for you automatically with the Active Directory. Down here towards the bottom of the screen, we have the conversation view. So this is a conversation that's going on within the context of an individual team channel. Within the conversation at any point, you can use the @ symbol, so you can @ a person or @ a team, and that will flag up that particular conversation for the attention of the team or the individual. The other useful feature here is the search bar at the top of the screen. Very powerful search feature, so it will search across all of the conversations, all of the chats, all of the wikis, etc. documents. So if you're not quite sure which channel a particular conversation was going on in, then use the search bar. That's the quickest way of getting back to where you were. If you want to strike up an instant conversation, an instant message, or a voice or video call, then just put the name of the person in the search bar, or go to the chat window over here under the app chat, and then you can strike up a one-to-one conversation, or even a group of people on a chat, voice or video call. Once you're into that chat, voice or video call, you'll get the call controls here down at the bottom of the screen. So what this allows you to do is to see who's on the call, add new participants, enable or disable your voice or video, share your screen, etc. So there's a lot of functionality in Microsoft Teams. So quite one of the questions we get asked a lot is, where do we start? So our recommendations here of how to start small and then, allow people to get used to Teams before you start deploying and training people on some of the more advanced features. So start with chat. I mean, you don't even need to create teams or channels to start with chat. Chat is just a peer-to-peer or small groups of people outside of the context of a team. So that's a very simple way of getting started. And then you can add voice or video onto that. So if you're looking for just collaboration between co-workers, then that's a very easy function to get up and running. Once you start creating teams, what we recommend is that you start with a small number of large teams rather than a large number of smaller teams. Much easier to manage. And now with this ability to create private channels within the team as well, that lends itself to having much larger teams. That was one of the challenges previously, was that if you gave everybody access to a large team, then they'd be able to see all of the content across all of the channels. So private channels has been a big help in that area. The other thing that we recommend is that you look at moving those internal email conversations from Outlook over to Teams. So within a Teams channel, every Teams channel, you have the ability of extracting an email address, an internal email address that you can forward those internal Outlook conversations to, and then you can pick up and continue the conversation within that Teams channel. So one of the things that we do is we look very carefully at the amount of internal email traffic that we generate. And what we're seeing over a period of time is that internal Outlook traffic dropping and the Teams usage going up. The other thing to mention there is that, I mentioned earlier about Microsoft's R&D spend, and we can see already within Teams that we've got the calendar functionality from Outlook effectively duplicated or replicated into Microsoft Teams. So it's only one more step, a big step albeit, but one more step to take the email functionality from Outlook and build that into Teams as well. We could see a day, it's not on the Microsoft roadmap, it's not been announced, but we could see a day where the Outlook client is completely replaced with the Teams client. And that would obviously be a massive change for your user base. So in summary, Microsoft Teams. A few points to note here. What do we need to do before we roll out Microsoft Teams? Some of the key things that we ask you to consider are securing the Microsoft 365 tenant. So there's a question actually that I'll take at this point. So there's a question in, a really good question actually. Why would an individual or organization choose Teams over applications such as Zoom? What additional security functionality does MS Teams bring? That's a really important point. So obviously Teams is tightly integrated, or it's part and parcel of the Microsoft 365 suite, which comes with Azure AD. So that allows you to secure access to Teams from either the location, the device, or the user on any combination of those three things, depending on which bits of the Microsoft 365 suite you're using. So you've got a lot of central control over who can access Teams and where they can access it from. We've also got encryption, both in transit and at rest, everything that goes into the Microsoft 365 portal, including Microsoft Teams, is completely secured. There's a lot of chatter around at the moment about some of the security weaknesses in the Zoom product, particularly. So we very much see Zoom as being in the kind of the shadow IT area of the business, whereas Teams is, you know, part and parcel of your core IT suite and can be managed and secured centrally. So that's securing the tenant. The other areas that we need to think about is synchronizing your Active Directory. You've got your on-premise Active Directory. What we really want to do is allow access to Microsoft Teams using those same credentials, and ideally with seamless single sign-on. So a key prerequisite is that we synchronize the Azure Active Directory, the on-premise Active Directory up to the Azure Active Directory using Azure AD Connect. And the other thing to think about is compliancy and data retention. So we recommend as a minimum that you put in a data retention policy into the Microsoft 365 portal to retain all of the Teams and document data that's stored within Teams. So retention policy as a minimum. You could also add a third-party backup product like Veeam or Rubrik that will back up and take that data outside of the Microsoft 365 world. So if your IT policy is that the data has to be backed up outside of the key vendor, then we can implement a third-party backup technology to help with that. Okay, we've got some other questions here. What's your advice on team naming standards and tips for avoiding team duplication? So again, that's a really good question. So again, talking about that Active Directory syncing that I talked about earlier, you know, the way that I would recommend that you do this is that you actually only allow teams to be created from security groups. So the groups are created in your on-premise AD, synced across to Azure AD, and then it's only those groups that are allowed to create teams, or the team is only allowed to be created from those groups. So that gives you full management capability of what teams are being created. Otherwise, it can become a bit chaotic if you know the default behavior is that anybody can create a team and create any membership within that team, and that's a recipe for having a lot of teams. And it becomes unmanageable very quickly, actually. So that would be my way of dealing with that. Another question: can I dial in another person into a meeting that is already in flight? Yeah, I mean that's very straightforward to do. If we go back to the call control screen here, I can click on the call control down here, the one next to the Hangout button. That shows the list of participants. And if I click on the ellipse over here, then I can add new participants to the call. So regardless of whether the call was a scheduled meeting or whether it was just an ad hoc call that I made, I can always add additional participants into the call. So the next question we get asked, obviously, is how much does this cost? You know, it's a big product, a lot of functionality. The good news is there's a completely free version available. So if you haven't already subscribed to Microsoft 365 or Office 365, then there's a free version available, so that can get you up and running. Not the full functionality, but it does have the chat and the voice, the video, the meetings functionality. So there's enough in there for that peer-to-peer and co-worker collaboration. So if you haven't already subscribed, that's the easiest starting point. Then there's the full paid version, which is embedded within most of the Office 365 and Microsoft 365 subscriptions. Now, any of these subscriptions have always been available on a 30-day trial. But what Microsoft have done in a specific response to this COVID-19 outbreak is they've made the E1 subscription, the Office 365 E1 subscription, they've now made that available for a 6-month trial. So more than enough time, hopefully, to see us through this lockdown period. So if you want to trial the full paid-for version, then the E1 trial is the best way to go. And of course, it's still available free of charge in the education sector. So any academic institution can use the A1 version free of charge, which that includes the full Teams functionality. The full paid-for product functionality is available there to all academic institutions and all users within those academic institutions. So why do we use Microsoft Teams? As I've said, the ease of use, everything in one place, new features being added all of the time. I mentioned earlier about the amount of investment that Microsoft are making in it. And it's about maximising your existing investment as well. You've probably, in many cases, already got some sort of Office 365 or Microsoft 365 subscription. So Teams is already included in all of those subscriptions. So it's just about getting it deployed and understanding the functionality. So that brings us to the end of the presentation slides, but let's just have a look to see if there are any other questions that we can look at today. So there's a good question here. Can I save documents to a file to review later? So we only touched briefly on documents, but you can store documents within Microsoft Teams. What that's actually doing behind the scenes is that's creating the documents or storing the documents in a SharePoint Online site. And if you feel that you're going to need those documents offline at some point, then what you can do is you can synchronize that SharePoint Online site back down to your desktop or your device. And then that synchronization will be looked after in the background for you. So if you do work on the document offline, as soon as you come back online, that document will be synced back into the SharePoint Online site and will be available to everybody else that's in that team. So there's no need for you to worry about uploading and downloading documents. All of that will be taken care of in the background. So that brings me to the end of this live event. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for those questions that you did post in. If you have any other questions following the event, or you'd like to look at Teams in a bit more depth, then please do send an email to remote.working@qassociates.co.uk. As I've said, we've got a lot of expertise around the whole Microsoft 365 stack, including Microsoft Teams. So we'd love to hear from you. I'd love to get into a more detailed conversation with you. We will be running more live events over the next few weeks with us, again, with a specific focus on remote working. The next one that we're planning is to look at remote working on virtual desktops. Again, a really popular subject in this time of lockdown and remote working. So I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible on that event. And again, many thanks for listening today. Bye for now.